Well, howdy everybody. Here to give you a rundown of the answers to the Unit 2 review questions that y'all should be taking on the Canvas quiz. Again, I know this isn't the Canvas quiz, but the questions do go right along with it. And so as you watch, I'll give you the answer, explain it, and help you make sure you get 25 out of 25 on this thing. So let's get started. Number one, which of the following would result in a rightward shift of the aggregate demand curve? Four things affect demand: consumption, investment spending, government spending, and net exports. So in this case, the answer to number one is B, an increase in net exports. That means other countries are buying our things. As they buy our things, then it increases aggregate demand. The other ones would either cause aggregate demand to decrease or wouldn't affect aggregate demand at all. So number one is B. Number two, which of the following will remain unchanged when the price level decreases? Well, the whole theory behind the long-run aggregate supply curve is that in the long run, our output is really not impacted by price changes, and so our full employment output is what it is. Whether prices have gone higher or lower, we always kind of come back to that point. So the answer to number two is letter C. Okay, the long-run aggregate supply curve has nothing to do with prices. That's why it's a vertical line. Number three, an increase in the MPC is going to cause an increase in which of the following? The answer here, number three, is B. So again, if the MPC was 0.8, okay, you needed the formula for the spending multiplier, which remember is 1 over 1 minus the MPC. So if you do that formula, if the MPC is 0.8, the spending multiplier is 5. Again, I didn't write out the formula, but there's the number. Let's say you raise the MPC to 0.9. That makes our spending multiplier 10. So increasing the MPC, say from 0.8 to 0.9, causes the spending multiplier to increase. Basically, people are spending more of their money, and it's going to make money matriculate through the economy that much faster. Number four, discretionary fiscal policy action intended to reduce inflation. So inflation is the concern. We're trying to get inflation to come down. Well, first of all, we know fiscal policy is going to affect aggregate demand. If you want inflation to come down, you want aggregate demand to decrease. Okay, so what would cause aggregate demand to decrease? And the answer is letter B. If you increase taxes or if the government spends less, aggregate demand comes down, as does price level. That helps get inflation under control. All right, number five, this is an interesting one. Okay, so the question is, what would cause the short-run Phillips curve to shift to the right? So let me show you real quick. Let me do it down here. Okay, so I've got more room. Okay, a short-run Phillips curve. Well, that blue line's right there. We'll just ignore it. All right, so the SRPC, and here you have inflation, and here you have unemployment. Okay, now, for the SRPC to move rightward, we would have to say start at point A and move this way to what we can call point B, and that would create a new curve going through it. Okay, now notice what happens here from point A to point B. Okay, inflation goes up and unemployment goes up. Well, there's one thing that causes inflation to go up and unemployment to go up at the same time. By the way, that's called stagflation, which we'll see in just a moment. But that's called stagflation. One thing that causes that to happen: a decrease in the SRAS, a decrease in the short-run aggregate supply curve. Now, you come back up to number five and you say, MERS, that's not an option. Okay, that's a problem. Well, okay, no, it's not an option, but let's eliminate some here. So we should automatically be able to eliminate A, B, and E, because those shifts would not cause inflation and unemployment to go up at the same time. Now, the answer here is going to end up being letter D. Let me skip ahead to another question, just because it's got a graph I want to show you that'll help out. Look at this graph right here. Okay, this is a graph that is in expansion. Okay, so in other words, remember, here's full employment, and right now we are operating beyond full employment. What's going to happen in the long run? In the long run, workers are working like crazy. They're going to expect what? That's right, higher wages. Okay, so as they expect higher wages, businesses hire fewer people. As they hire fewer people, it causes the SRAS to shift to the left. Now remember, that's what we were looking for in that answer, right? We're looking for something that would cause the SRAS to shift left. Now, why did it shift left? Because workers start expecting higher wages. If inflationary expectations go up, people start demanding and or expecting higher wages, and that would cause the SRAS to shift to the left, and that would cause what we're looking for, number 5, a rightward shift of the short-run Phillips curve. That question was kind of a booger, but we could have at least eliminated those and then hopefully deduced from there. All right. Number 6, mentioned stagflation just a second ago. We are at full employment. What would cause stagflation? A leftward shift of the short-run aggregate supply curve. So number 6 is A. Okay, number 5 is D. Sorry if I didn't say that. Number 5 is D. Number 6 is A. That causes us to move outward like I showed you here on the short-run Phillips curve. All right, next page, number 7. Okay, we're at the situation right here. Okay, first question, are we in expansion or recession? Very good, recession. How do we know that? Because we are producing less than what we should be producing at our full employment output. Now, this is our classical approach. The government does nothing. What's going to happen? Well, if we're in recession and people are out of work, they're going to start to be willing to accept lower wages because they get desperate after a while. Okay, and that competition among workers forces wages down. As wages come down, businesses are able to hire more people. As they're able to hire more people, it's going to cause the SRAS to shift to the right and restore full employment. So which one said that? Looks like letter E. So number 7 is letter E. Falling wages, wages come down, shifts SRAS to the right, we come back to full employment. All right, number 7E. Number 8, if we're in recession, what's the government going to do? We know this. What are they doing right now? They are increasing spending. And how? Okay, $2 trillion. Fun fact, I don't know if you heard about this. I just saw this news article. There was a guy, I think from Indiana. He was expecting a $1,700 stimulus check. I think it's himself. He's maybe got one child at home, and so he's expecting a $1,700 stimulus check. He went to the bank yesterday and looked at his balance. $8.2 million was in his bank account that the government accidentally put into his bank account. Now, they did take it back. Don't worry, he got his $1,700, but they took back the $8.2 million, but the government's spending money. Let's just put it that way. So, fun fact, I'm not that lucky, but that's okay. Number 9, a major advantage of automatic stabilizers, automatic is always the key word here, is that government doesn't have to do anything special. Right? They just happen. That's why they're called automatic. All right, so number 9 is D. Okay, number 10, in 2017, government outlays. What is an outlay? I don't know. Why do they use a word like that? Government expenditures. Okay, government spending. Okay, government spending exceeded tax revenues. In other words, the government spent more money than they brought in, ergo they have a deficit. What happens the next year? An increase in government purchases, so they spend even more without any other budgetary changes. In other words, taxes don't change. Well, if they're already in deficit and then they spend more, the deficit's going to get bigger, and that's going to increase the national debt. Okay, so letter C is the answer to number 10. Debt gets bigger. Number 11, an economy is in equilibrium. What will be the short-run effects of an increase in investment spending? Now, this one's tricky. Now, remember, the 4 things that shift aggregate demand: consumption, number 2, investment spending. So this is in the short run going to affect aggregate demand. Now in the long run, this might affect growth and things like that, but we're talking about the short run here. So it's going to be an aggregate demand thing in the short run. If aggregate demand increases in the short run, we're going to see an increase in real output, a decrease in unemployment, and an increase in the price level. In other words, if aggregate demand increases, letter C is what's going to happen. GDP is going to go up, price is going to go up, but unemployment goes down because more people are working, making more things. So number 11 is C. Number 12, we got this graph right here. Okay, this is the economic conditions. The natural rate of unemployment is 6%. Okay, so full employment is 6%. What is actual unemployment? 5.1%. So actually more people are working than we would normally have. If more people are working, do you think we are at Y2, Well, of course we're not, because that would be 6% unemployment. That's full employment. But the question is, we're going to be to the left of Y2 or to the right of Y2? That's right. Very good. We're at the right of Y2. And so at some point, letter E greater than Y2, because essentially we're in expansion. If unemployment is less than it would normally be, we're in expansion, so we're beyond that full employment output. So number 12 is E. Number 13, ooh, you're gonna love this one. All right, the MPC is 0.9. So let's first of all understand that the spending multiplier, that makes it 10. Okay, spending multiplier equals 10. Why? 1 over 1 minus the point C, 1 over 1 minus the MPC, that's 1 over 1 minus 0.9, that's 1 over 0.1, 1 divided by 0.1 is 10. So spending multiplier is 10. And of course, you look at this and you say, okay, wait a minute, the government increases taxes, so they're taking money from people to the tune of $20 million. All right, so you know that GDP is going to decrease because the government's taking money out of the pocket. So you're like, MERS, got it. Okay, definitely not A or B because it's going to decrease. Easy. Government takes 20 million, multiply it by 10, and the answer is GDP is going to decrease by a maximum of 200 million. Not true. Number 13 is not letter E. Don't get confused by that. That is wrong. You say, wait a minute, MERS, why is that wrong? Here's the thing. The government takes, remember, this is the difference between taxing and spending. Remember, spending, government spending always has a greater impact on GDP than taxing does. And here's how you got to think about this one. The government takes $20 million from people. Would the people have spent all $20 million? Okay, no, they would not. They would have only spent 90% of it. That means of the 20 million that the government took, what is actually being left or lost here is $18 million in spending. Again, why 18? Because that's 90% or 0.9 of 20 million. That's how much people would have actually spent is 18 million. They would have kept or saved the other 2 million because of the MPC and the MPS. So what we're really losing out on is $18 million in spending multiplied 10 times over, okay? And so it's 180 million that the economy is going to decrease by, and so it's letter C. How many of y'all picked that up? Hopefully you did, but if you did not, don't feel too bad. That one's a tricky one. So number 13 is C. Okay, there you go, you got it. Number 14, which of the following is a fiscal policy action aimed at reducing unemployment? In other words, what would the government do in times of recession? They would lower taxes and or increase spending. But letter B is the answer to number 14. Number 15, according to the long-run Phillips curve, which of the following is true? And the answer is that in the long run, you can do all the fiscal and monetary policy actions you want, but eventually we're going to come back to that full employment output, which is what the long-run Phillips curve is measuring. So in other words, prices go up and down, but we always come back there. So whatever the government does is not going to matter. In the long run, we come back to full employment. Number 16, a favorable supply shock, such as a decrease in energy prices. So just if you want to graph it out, you can. That's going to cause SRAS to increase. Okay, and notice here what happens to price level and output. So price level decreases and output increases, letter B. Okay, price level went down and output goes up as a result of the SRAS increase. All right, we kind of answered this one already a moment ago, so we'll do it pretty quick. What's going to happen here in the long run? Remember, we are in expansion. We're beyond full employment. In the long run, wages are going to go up, causing SRAS to decrease. Okay, and that sounds a lot like letter C to me. Increase in wages, causing SRAS to decrease. So 17 is C. Number 18, the government reduces spending and raises taxes. Okay, so in other words, the government's going to decrease the aggregate demand curve by taxing more and spending less. That's going to make unemployment increase, okay, as aggregate demand shifts left. All right, so a decrease or an increase in unemployment. Number 19, which of the following should occur as a result of automatic stabilizers in time of recession? So automatic stabilizers just automatically put into practice fiscal policy, typical fiscal policy actions. So in times of recession, what's going to happen? Taxes are going to decrease and spending is going to increase. And so that would be letter D is the closest one to that. Tax revenues decrease. Transfer payments, which is money taken from one group given to another, are going to increase because there's more unemployed, more people getting welfare and whatnot. Number 20, which of the following is true about a country's national debt? It increases when the government has a budget deficit. Remember, the debt is the total accumulation of all the deficits that the government has run over the years, all the money they owe. So if we have a deficit, it goes up. Number 21, the aggregate demand curve is downward sloping because as price levels increase, your buying power decreases. The money you have doesn't buy as much because prices go up, and so the purchasing power of wealth decreases. That would make sense. Number 22, the intersection of the aggregate supply curve and aggregate demand curve. So in other words, SRAS and AD. What do we find out about that? We find out what our output is and price level, just like we saw a moment ago in this graph, okay, the SRAS and the AD. What does that tell us? That tells us where our output and price level are at, okay? So number 22 is C. Almost there. Number 23, the federal government decreases spending by $10 billion. Okay, we know that's going to decrease aggregate demand. But then they decrease taxes by $10 billion. That's going to increase aggregate demand. Now remember though, so they're decreasing aggregate demand and increasing aggregate demand, but it's not an equal cancellation because the spending has a greater impact than the taxes do. So in other words, the GDP is going to decrease more because of the spending cut than it's going to increase because of the tax cut. So what do we know is that aggregate income, or GDP is another way of saying that, is going to decrease by something up to 10 billion. We don't know the MPC, so we don't know exactly how much, but it's not going to cancel out because the spending has a greater impact than taxing does. 24, the whole theory behind supply side is that if you cut taxes, it gives people more of an incentive to save, invest, and work, and that boosts GDP, and that can actually boost tax revenues. Okay, so if you reduce tax rates, which is the percentage the government takes, it can increase, it can boost the economy, and which increases tax revenues. That's the Laffer curve, if you remember that. And the last one, an increase in aggregate demand is going to cause which of the following? Remember, when you shift aggregate demand, that moves along a Phillips curve. The short-run Phillips curve is where we move if there's an aggregate demand shift. It's the supply shifts that move us off of the curve. Okay, so supply shifts don't fit the Phillips curve, but demand shifts do. And there you go, letter A. So hopefully that answers all those for you. It gets your perfect score on this quiz and all your points. And until next time, behave yourselves.